Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
I have something that's very unusual for our radio shows. Usually we're talking with physicians or entertainers or people who have different kinds of credentials. But when I went to the Canine-N-Kids Foundation, Canine-N-Kids Foundation, I saw a very unusual situation, and I now have ULRIKE. Is that how I pronounce it? ULRIKE?
ULRIKE, perfect. Thank you.
And your last name is
Szalay.
Szalay. Okay,
right.
I'll get this.
It's okay. I'm German and Hungarian, so that's my excuse.
Well, I'm Hungarian too, but I don't have that name. Okay. So you are doing something that's extremely unusual, and it's so wonderful, especially, you don't know this, one reason I was a little late this morning was because I have my dog with me. My dog's back legs don't work very much anymore, so but he comes everywhere with me in a carriage.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's what this is really all about. I mean, at its bottom, right, the CanineNKids Foundation, you may have read, is about solving the cancers that people and our pets both develop, but really at the bottom of everything I do and we do is it's really about that profound love between humans and man's best friend in particular. It's just, that's why we do these things.
So tell me, what made you do this?
So I have a background in biotech and oncology. I worked for about a dozen years in a small company developing medicines for human cancers, and we actually had a clinical trial going on in adult human patients to treat their cancers with a new drug, and we actually looked at that drug in canine cancer patients in parallel, and we watched the differences and similarities in how the cancers behaved when they were exposed to the drug in both of these patient groups. So again, always as patients, clinical trials in both cases. And it sort of opened my eyes to this incredible field and the incredible promise of integrating, if you will, man's best friend into the whole research and drug development process so that we could go forward faster, because on both of these sides, really, we hear every day about cancer in the news and it's affecting somebody we love, right? But we haven't made any really profound breakthroughs yet, particularly for children or for dogs. But I would also argue for us as a society, we really haven't moved the needle dramatically. We're understanding cancer better and we're catching it earlier, and we have some new therapies on the market that are promising. But by bringing science and medicine together in this way, instead of having these silos on both sides, right? Because cancer is about rapidly dividing cells that the immune system doesn't see. That's what it is. And it happens in dogs, and it happens in cats, and it happens in people. And understanding the similarities and differences between how we develop cancer and what it takes to treat it can help us by bringing all of this together. That's what Canines-N-Kids is working to do, to put an end in shared cancers between children and man's best friend.
And you know how unusual this is.
Well, it's unusual a little bit, because really this field that we're talking about is called comparative cancer research. There are places in Florida, for example, at the University of Florida, and many, many other amazing academic institutions where doctors and veterinary oncologists that treat both people and pets, right, are already working together. And actually the field has been around for about 40 years, but science is now catching up, and we're able to really look at real differences and similarities between the cancers that dogs develop and the cancers that people develop, and understand them better in order to leverage those similarities and differences to accelerate development of new and better medicines.
Are the treatments the same?
Very, very similar. Absolutely. And ironically, I think we're going to talk a little bit about this book we just wrote, but the irony of this is that, yes, the way especially dogs and children experience cancer, how their cancers develop, how they come back, how they recur, unfortunately, and how kids and dogs in particular respond to cancer treatments is actually very, very similar. We adults, by comparison, are a little bit wimpier. Like, these two other populations are incredible in the way in how parallel they are. But cancer is difficult no matter who it is. But really, there are scientifically, so biologically, and in terms of genetics, some really exciting similarities that between people, between children in this case, and dogs, that we can really leverage to make progress. That doesn't mean they don't exist between adult people and our dogs. actually they do. So let's talk for a moment about the cancers we're talking about. We're talking about bone cancer in children and dogs being very, very similar, the one we know the most about. We're learning every day more about brain cancers, lymphoma, and leukemia. So those are the liquid cancers, if you will. If you go over to the adults, it's relevant in bladder cancer, prostate cancer, mammary tumors, so breast cancers. All of those things between people and dogs generally are really areas of exciting science, and we're learning every day a little bit more.
My goodness, you are an expert, and so you bridged both your professions and specialties together to do this, and you wrote this wonderful book. So what actually is in the book? When I read the book, what am I going to find out?
So the book is called We'll Get Through This Together. What I didn't tell you is that I am the proud mom of 3 kids and a black lab, and have worked with canines in animal-assisted therapy, so in nursing homes and in schools and everywhere with a service dog. All of my career is sort of my outlet, right? When you're dealing in cancer research, it's really kind of tough sometimes, and this was my therapy as much as we were working with children in most cases. So near and dear to me is this incredible bond between people and pets, and particularly between children and dogs. There's something really amazing about watching a child tell its deepest secrets to a dog, knowing that they won't judge them. They're really good listeners. They never talk back, right? And so all of that kind of was sitting underneath. Knowing also now that kids and dogs go through cancer treatment very similarly, I decided to write this book one day. Literally woke up and I thought, how could we kind of bring these things together? So We'll Get Through This Together is a really nicely illustrated children's book, but really what it talks about is all of the main things that most kids will experience in going through cancer treatment, some of the scary and confusing things, as well as some of the lonely things, the treatments that they'll go through, the procedures, what a hospital feels like, how sometimes they might not understand doctors and nurses and they talk too fast, what it feels like to go into a big MRI machine, and what do you do? How do you lay still? And the dog in this case is acting kind of like a friend and a comfort object. In this case, he's providing that love and comfort to the child all the way through, as you kind of expect man's best friend would. But the interesting thing about this book is that if you think about what we said before, actually you could reverse the roles, right? And that's kind of the double entendre in this book. But the book is aimed at children entering treatment. I imagine that it will be read with children, sitting in the treatment chair. It's accompanied by a matching black stuffed lab, which is really sweet and doesn't have any metal parts. It can go into an MRI machine with a child, for example. And I'm imagining a parent or a caregiver or a child life specialist who works with a child in the hospital setting, really using this book as a way to get the conversation going about some of the difficult things that kids go through. When your hair falls out, it's difficult for anybody, but imagine it being an adolescent, right? Somebody who's really just coming into their own, and suddenly they look completely different. Those are conversations that this book, in a very gentle way, it kind of gets to, and it does it in a playful way because the dog is the narrator.
Oh, my goodness. I'm overwhelmed just listening to you, and I'm sure there are lots of illustrations, color illustrations, because the child wants that. And I was thinking as you were talking, Ulrike, that as much as it's important, of course, for a child to have comfort from their parents and all, and everybody that's human, a dog needs that also.
No question. And that love in reverse, right? That bond, that human-animal bond is really... That's at the crux, like we said at the beginning, of everything we do here. We called this particular project, which involves the book, which we are hoping to get to all of the 16,000 children that are entering treatment each year, along with the stuffed pup project Hearts and Tails. That says everything, right? Hearts, tails, everything.
You're amazing. That's true. And this is really a very big project for you. What do you do when you're not doing this? Are you using your expertise in the fields that you just talked about?
So I have decided to kind of headlong run the foundation. It's a lot of work to kind of forge bringing these two fields together is kind of a new thing, right? And so we're really working to kind of lead and bring people together. We have a big medical and science meeting that we do that we'll do again in June of 2020, where we bring the top doctors that treat kids and dogs together and talk about this with industry, like pharmaceutical companies and everyone. You know, how can we bring all this together? How can we help these two most vulnerable patient groups? So that's one thing. So I work a lot on raising awareness, bringing people together. We have to raise money. Cancer is really expensive, and this very unique area of research is really, really promising. So funding some of that clinical research is one of my jobs that I really work on hard every single day. We're bringing all the data together before you even touch a patient. There's amazing data out there, and, you know, we're kind of in the generation, we and older, for whom this is kind of wow, but for the kids underneath us, you know, mining data for similarities and differences, that's where we're going to start, and it's a powerful tool. So we're bringing together the data around the cancers that exist in people and pets in places. So I work a lot with doctors who are working in that area, bioinformatics. So there's so many things, so many pieces to this, but really I'm kind of the CEO of this crazy adventure, and it's called the Canine-N-Kids Foundation, and I would love anyone that wants to participate with us in some way to get involved. It's really exciting.
So let's give them your website. Let's see. I do have it, but I'll just say what I have is Canine, and then N is an N. Canine-N. Well, no, actually, it's canines with an S, right?
Right,
N,
plural.
kids.
Right.
Canines. Oh, yes, canines with a big capital N, then capital kids.org. CanineNKids.org.
That's absolutely right. Yep, perfect.
And people can look at the website, and you can find out, and then you want to buy the book. And as you said, all the proceeds from the book are going back into the project.
Exactly. So you can buy the book on our website, and really it's applicable to any child who might be facing a serious illness. That's the first thing. But one thing I didn't tell you, also on our website, if you go to the How You Can Help area and you see Project Hearts and Tails, which is what we were just talking about, if people want to get involved with that and help us fund getting a child, a book, and a dog somewhere around the country, they can make a $30 donation that gets this beautiful stuffed pup and the book to a kid somewhere. So I would love people to get involved in that way, but there's certainly many, many other ways as well. There's a lot on that website to look at. So
sounds like you're having cooperation from vets too. I mean, because they know that this is serious. I just read something, and I just read that vets have a very high suicide rate. And I didn't know that. And it explained why. Because they're usually the end result of taking care of a dog is death.
Absolutely. And this is I think one of the interesting things one of the things that holds cancer research, in my opinion, back in the canine world, and actually in the feline and the cat world too, right, is that we have this sometimes incredibly compassionate out, right, called euthanasia for dogs and cats. And because we have that, it makes it difficult, to make the argument to spend endless amounts of money to treat a pet for cancer. It's a double-edged sword. You can see that. For a veterinarian that's treating that dog, to manage the ones that I've seen that do it really well, I mean, to manage that conversation with the family to decide when enough is enough for Fido or the kitty cat, right? That's emotional. It's emotional for everybody. And so I'm not surprised, actually. And I think the veterinary profession is vastly undervalued when it comes to how many life and death conversations they have to have that are very different than the life and death conversations sometimes than we have to have about our people, but they're no less impactful for you or me who love this creature, right? It's a big decision to basically take the role of, if you believe in God, to take God's hand, role in that moment and make that decision for that animal. I think that weighs very heavily on everyone, and veterinarians do that every single day. And I'm in awe of the amazing care that they deliver for their patients.
Yes, I have a fabulous vet. Also, it's very, it just says you're doing the right thing. And even though I have an invalid for a dog, I mean, I'm there. It's like having hospice, but I'm there, and he responds to me. He just can't walk, that's all. But we do everything else. In fact, he's here in the studio because he comes with me everywhere. but he doesn't have cancer. He had something else, but that's okay. I don't want to talk about him. What I want to talk about is what you're saying, because I can really understand how now you have the same, similar treatment, but the same feelings coming from the children, from the dogs, from the parents, from everyone who loves those two creatures.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's interesting when you explain all of this to a child on a very simple level. They get it. They understand. One little 6-year-old girl said to me, "Oh, so you can develop treatments or medicines for people that can help pets, and for medicines for pets that could help people." Oh. And I said, "That's it.
6-year-old brain, right?
A 6-year-old.
Words of babes,
yeah.
right?
Yep. And it's complicated. We are different species, right? Dogs are 84% like us, but there are 6 million of them that develop cancer every year. And only, in quotes, right, 500,000 adult people and 16,000 kids. And the problem is the kid and the adult cancers don't even match. So where those cancers match more closely between children and the puppy dogs, we have a huge opportunity to work together and to bring those numbers and those added patients into the mix to help sort some things out about tumor biology, about how your immune system plays a role, about a whole lot of things about cancer. So it's more complicated than it seems. So nobody's making this sound simple. But on a child's level, when a kid gets it, just the general concept is pretty amazing.
Well, I was thinking about, there are many people now going into remission. Do dogs and cats go into remission?
Absolutely. There are actually a number of areas where dogs' cancer treatments are very, very successful, and they live healthy lives. They seem to develop some of the really tough cancers like bone cancer and brain cancer, and actually lymphoma too sometimes. They kind of are almost on a fast track. They age more quickly than we do, and there are probably reasons that are connected to that their cancers move so much faster than ours. And they live a shorter life overall, right? So, but where those treatments are successful, and a lot of those treatments were developed for human beings, right? The similar and same chemotherapies and radiation therapies and types of surgeries that dogs receive are very similar. And so, if a dog's bone cancer, for example, is caught early and it's in, let's say, its hind leg, and that leg can be amputated, a dog can live very happily on 3 legs and be perfectly fine. But the problem with this disease, as you know, is that it almost never is just in one place. It's just wicked smart, as I like to say about cancer, unfortunately, and we need to figure out how to beat it when it gets in other places in the body. So just as with people, when that happens in a dog, when it goes metastatic, when it goes to other places, that's when we have a big problem, and it's really tough to cure it.
Oh, boy. It's funny. When we asked you to be on the show, I looked at this very quickly and I said, "Oh, she sounds like she's interesting." Never did I believe or know how fascinating and how important this is. Have you done anything down here in South Florida yet?
So not yet, but I think that it would be a good idea. I would love at some point to get to Florida. But University of Florida up further north does a tremendous amount of work already between their medical and their veterinary school in this area. So definitely people in Florida, check that out because it's pretty amazing. But really, Canines and Kids and this work to bring all of this together is everywhere. So if you have any good suggestions for how we can come and talk to your listeners in Florida and work together to bring more attention and resources to this issue, I am happy to be there. I'll come right down.
And let me see. I have a note. You're calling now from where? Where's 703?
Northern Virginia. So we're right outside of Washington, D.C. And it's a good place to be parked in some ways because we're near the National Cancer Institute and the NIH, where we have a lot of good alignments there. But really, this weekend, it's Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. November is Canine Cancer Awareness Month, so we're kind of bookending October, right? But this weekend, for example, on the National Mall is a huge festival called Cure Fest, where all of the organizations that work in the childhood cancer world get together, and you'd be amazed at how many tents there are, and every single tent represents a family of a child that's been lost or has been ill.
Really? It's called Cure Fest?
Cure Fest.
What a wonderful name.
It blows your mind to see all of that, and it's really amazing to be part of that. It's quite an honor. So we kind of drive up that middle lane because we work with our friends in the animal health world as well as with the pediatric cancer foundations. So that's what we'll be doing this weekend. So Washington area is not a bad place to be parked for this because there's kind of a hub for those kinds of things. But we work everywhere. This is we can't cure any complicated disease by ourselves. No one researcher, no one institution. This is all about collaboration and bringing the best minds in science and medicine together, no matter where they are, right? So if they're in South Florida, fantastic. If they're in Maine, that's great. We will bring them together, and that's the goal.
So I want to talk about horses. So we keep saying canine. I guess it's difficult because you had to say something, but a cat isn't a canine, and a horse isn't a canine. So how do you get those involved? I guess people just assume, right?
Yeah, and so we know the most about, in terms of similarities with people, right? In the canine world, there are some kitty cat cancers that are very, very similar. I am not as familiar with the equine side of things. I know that there are cancers that they develop, and I'm certain that they endure some of the same therapies, but I'm going to leave that for an equine vet to talk about.
Okay.
I'm not a veterinarian, and I don't want to. I don't want to make. I'd rather talk about the things that I know a lot about. But definitely, there are opportunities. Look, animals of all kinds, whether if you consider people as mammals, we all develop diseases, and they're tripped by a lot of the same things, right?
Right.
And that's what we're trying to get at, right? It doesn't matter if you're a horse or a cat or a cow. If there's something to be learned from us, then we should throw it in the pot. That's kind of what we're, what I mean?
Right. So I have a question, since you're dealing in this. When let's take it with a dog, has cancer or something serious, the first thing they don't want to do is eat. What do you get them to eat? Do you have special formulas, or do you have super drinks, or tell me about that?
So again, because I'm not a veterinarian, I'm going to have to kind of go with what I know. I'm not a veterinarian, but that's okay. Right. I can say to you that when a puppy dog or a kitty cat isn't feeling well, veterinarians use a lot of different things. They have appetite stimulants just like they do for people. Certainly getting them to feel better. Sometimes it's a matter of putting an IV in and getting hydration up so that they're feeling all around better, and then they perk up and they do things that they normally do more effectively. But it's a bunch of different strategies. I mean, the interesting thing is that veterinary medical care, when it comes to those sorts of situations, is so similar to what we do with people. If you go to any of these major cancer centers that are animal cancer centers at the big vet schools, you would walk in, and if you didn't know, you'd think you were in a human hospital. So really? A lot of the same things, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the children. So when a child has cancer and they have a dog at home, are they allowed, and if they're in the hospital, can they bring the dog there?
So this is another big passion play of mine. I would love to see more children in the oncology and the cancer units of hospitals, have access to the comforts of a pet. There are a few cancer centers that have developed some more forward-looking programs. I can't remember where. I heard recently they had developed like a visitation room where for certain patients, families could bring in a separate elevator or staircase Fido or a kitty cat from home for a visit with the child that's in the hospital. This all goes back, though, to in the hospital, right, making sure that the infection control is tight so that kids who are their immune systems are really weak, especially in cancer. So I think there's always an overabundance of caution. So I would say that as a rule, most children that are inpatients who are being treated in the hospital as cancer patients do not have access to A, their own dogs for sure in the hospital, or B, even sometimes the therapy animals that come in to other parts of the hospital where kids aren't as immune compromised. So I think they're always looking at it in terms of how can we do more, because we understand the power of that human-animal bond and how it can help patients of all kinds, whether they're little or big people. And I think over time you'll see more creative approaches to that. certainly in the outpatient setting, meaning where kids have already gone home and such things, you can bring animal-assisted therapy together with those patients, but the hospitals are definitely very cautious about that, and understandably so when those kids are really in a fragile place, right? So it's hard because that's why this project Hearts and Tails. That's why that puppy dog, something to hold on to when you have to leave all of that behind. That's kind of why we did that.
Yeah. Let me tell everybody, if you've been listening and this is such an interesting conversation, but we're talking to Ulrike, right? Ulrike.
Yes, Ulrike, right.
Ulrike Szalay.
Szalay, right.
Szalay, sorry.
No worries.
Not doing that right. But she's so big. Don't worry about her name. Just know that she's the founder of Canine-N-Kids Foundation. And we want you very much to buy the book if you have children, even if they have no cancer, hopefully, or your dogs, because they ought to understand what it's like. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to go to their website, which is CanineNKids.org. And you're going to see, this is very new stuff. I mean, I call cutting edge. This is great. When I first saw what you were doing, you didn't know how complex it was. I thought that was pretty good too, but that's absolutely wonderful. So let me just ask you, though, there are so many treatments for dogs. No, I know. I want to talk about, there's a dog that I think what they do is they can go up to a patient or a cat and smell cancer. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, obviously dogs, we all know this, but those of us who have dogs have incredibly acute senses of smell. They can be trained to sniff certain things, and I think some of it is instinctive, right? They can sniff when something's not right somehow, and I'm not sure that we even really fully understand, right? We, as a scientific community, really understands what's at play there. But there are places where dogs are being trained to hone in on certain things. Certainly, dogs have already been trained for years to sense seizure disorders, right? When there's a seizure coming, to nudge the patient, they sense it, and they nudge the patient. The patient sits down so that they don't fall and hit their head when they start to seize. Similarly, with cancer detection, dogs are starting to be looked at as potentially a way to literally sniff out cancer. I don't know.
I know. With that, I'm afraid that we've run out of time. But
no.
But you've been terrific, and I'm sure that we'll be talking. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita.
And we'll. I'm sure we'll be back together. Thank you again
that
for
would
all
be
that
lovely.
you're doing. Okay.
Sure.
Bye.
Have a great day.
All right,
Thank
you
you.
too. Bye.
Bye-bye.